Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be discussing how I got fit, how I transformed myself from 130 pounds, flabby, very unconfident, to 170, 175 pounds of lean muscle. Okay? I'm going to be taking you through the whole 3 years anecdotally and giving you the best recount of events that I can possibly deliver. But before we get into that, my name is Noah. I am the founder of Get Her Done Fitness, and I made it my mission to help all the young men get the body and confidence that they've always wanted. And if you stick around till the end of this video, I'm going to have a little surprise for you guys. You're not going to want to miss out on this opportunity, so make sure to stick around until the end. Let's hop into this one. So it all started about 3 years ago now. 3.5 actually. 3.5 years ago, early to mid 2019, when I was 14 years old and I was very unconfident. I was going to school. I felt weak and fat compared to my other peers, and I was bullied a little bit because I have a bit of a stutter, and I was obviously kind of flabby, and just it was really rough, but I'm glad that I went through it because it gave me the drive and motivation to get myself out of that rut. That's when it kind of started to set in that I needed to make something of myself and that I'm not going to be like this forever. And that was a very big turning point. And so throughout that whole summer, it was the end of the school year, so around May, the end of May, is when I really started to work out. In my head, I was thinking that I'm going to come back to school and I'm going to be shredded. I'm going to be ripped. I'm going to look amazing, okay? And so throughout the whole summer, I was in my room and I was doing push-ups, I was doing sit-ups, I was doing push-ups, I was doing sit-ups, I was doing bicep curls with a 10-pound dumbbell. Everything seemed to be going great, although I was in the very beginning of my fitness journey and I also had no idea what I was doing. I definitely wasn't eating right. And so I really didn't make that much progress. But I did start to get a little bit leaner, but it wasn't the good kind of lean like where I was starting to look good. I was just starting to look skinny instead of skinny fat. But regardless, I still wasn't happy with my physique. And then also around that same time, the beginning of the school year, is when I started to run. And yet again with that, I had no idea what I was doing. I would go out every day or every other day and I'd go run a mile because the block that I live on, or that I lived on, was 1 mile. And so I would just run around the block as fast as I could. I put on my crappy running shoes and I'd go out every single morning without fail. Like every single day I did it. And I slowly got faster and faster. So it started out at like an 11-minute mile. And then I think around that time, I worked down to about an 8-minute mile in a couple months, which was really good for me because I never gotten under 10 minutes for a mile in school. And so it really meant a lot to me to be getting better at that. And not to mention, it was causing me to lean out too. And then during this whole time, I was still doing my home calisthenics workouts. And then I believe that I also started doing pistol squats for legs because I was watching a lot of calisthenics videos on YouTube and I was trying to master the basics. And then around this time, I also got a pull-up bar that I put on my doorway. So I was doing pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, or some sort of ab circuit, and then pistol squats as well. I think I was probably still doing the curls with the same 10-pound dumbbells. And I started to get quite a bit leaner. And then going into 2020 is when I really got serious about my running because I was running that mile every day. But then I think that I changed it up around that time, early 2020, where I started to do more volume, where I started to do more miles. But I actually gave myself some rest days because I was doing the mile every single day, right? But then I transitioned to doing like 2 miles every other day. And then eventually I was doing 5 or so miles, I think was my max at that point, like 5 or so miles every couple days, and everything was going great. And then I saw this trend from this guy on YouTube where he was running every day. And so I started to do that. And I actually ran every single day for, I think it was 176 days in a row. But it started out with me just running every day. I started out with like 2 miles, I think, that I ran every day. And then it worked up to quite some significant mileage every single week. I think I was hitting like 35, 40 miles a week. And that was really good. I was running every day, but I was running like 40 or so miles. So I'd run 5 miles, then 3 miles, and 5 miles. And then on Sunday, I'd have a long run of like 8 or 10 miles. I was getting really good at running, and I was still doing my home workouts, but I really still at that point, I was getting leaner, I think, but at that point, I wasn't really actually gaining any significant muscle mass. I was still just kind of maintaining, kind of leaning out, kind of gaining, just kind of fluctuating a little bit, but staying in the same general area. And I was definitely getting stronger at the calisthenics though. I was doing more pull-ups, I was doing more push-ups, I was getting stronger at that. I was progressing in that like every week. And then throughout the summer, I kept on running, but around that time, like mid summer of 2020 is when I was still running just full blast every single day, 35 miles a week, but that's when I joined a gym and I fully transitioned away from the calisthenics at home workouts to weightlifting. And just like with everything else that I did in my fitness journey, I didn't actually have a set plan. I didn't know what I was doing. I tried to watch some videos on YouTube. I tried to figure out good form and whatnot. But the bottom line was that I had no idea what I was doing. And if I would have kept on lifting that way and not have gotten better, I probably would have hurt myself because I had some pretty horrendous form on my deadlift and bench with my shoulders flared, my elbows flared, etc. And I started to gain a little bit more muscle because around this time I had also crashed on my longboard while I was on my way to my little job that I had. And so I hurt my hip because I crashed and landed right on my hip. Just I was going, I hit a rock, bam. And then I just went boom, just right on my hip. And so I wasn't able to run for 3 or so days. And so that broke my streak that I had of running every single day. And after that, I tried to get back into it, but it just wasn't the same. And I really realized how badly I wanted to have a good physique, how badly I wanted to have a lot of muscle. And so that's when I really started to focus on lifting in the gym. And then it was around the end of 2020 that I just totally tapered off and stopped running. And so I really enjoyed running. I got pretty good at it. I got, a 5 minute mile, and then I would get a 7 minute per mile pace on my long runs. So I was getting really good at it, but I just tapered off because I wanted to get as good at lifting and get as big as I possibly could. And I knew that if I kept on running, although cardio is important, and I still recommend you find a good form of cardio to do, I tapered off because I knew that if I kept on running at that pace and just doing that much, I would not be able to build as much muscle as I could otherwise. Transitioning fully into weightlifting, I was really focusing on that. And this is also when I really started to understand the importance of calories, because I was still tracking my calories for quite a while, but I definitely wasn't eating enough. I thought that if I ate good foods and I didn't eat that much of it, that it would help me gain muscle, which was just totally false. I needed to be eating, especially considering how much I leaned out while I was running. Like at this point, I had transitioned from skinny fat in the beginning to just straight up skinny. I was skin and bones for a minute there. And although I did have really good abs and a really good core because I was running, and that's a really good core exercise, I was very skinny. I didn't have a lot of muscle, and I realized the importance of eating and calories. And so I started to really consume those calories and try to focus on lifting as much as I could. And I made quite a bit of progress in the first little bit. I gained a little bit of muscle. When I started lifting in the gym, but I was still running fairly heavily, I think that I weighed around 140 pounds. Okay. And then in the beginning of 2021, so after I had fully tapered off from running, I was no longer running, and I was just getting into lifting with no running. So Around then, I think that I was getting up to like 145-ish, the beginning of 2021. And then as the year progressed, I just slowly gained weight. And then I worked all the way up to around 155 pounds. And I remember just, I had bought a scale because I didn't actually own a scale. And so I could only do it every now and again when I'd go to someone else's house or somewhere where there was a scale. So it wasn't that reliable, but I knew my weight during those times. I was like 145-ish around then. But then I got a scale, and then I remember I was consistently like 153-ish. And I was slowly working up from that, and I was just lifting all of 2021. And during that time I made quite a bit of progress, and then at the end of 2021 I was about 160. And so I gained about 15 or so pounds during that year, and I was making some pretty significant progress. It was awesome. But regardless, the body dysmorphia kind of started to set in, the feelings that I was lacking progress, because it wasn't going that fast, and then I was comparing myself day to day instead of however many months prior. So it seemed like I was making no progress, but I really was making progress, and it was kind of a dark time because I was trying to gain as much as I could, but it just didn't seem like it was working, even though it was working, but it really didn't seem like it. And then that takes us into the beginning of this year, 2022, where the beginning of this year, I was still kind of bulking, but kind of maintaining. I wasn't tracking my calories anymore. I kind of fell off for a little bit. I stopped tracking my calories. I was just eating a lot. I was trying to eat a lot. I'd go and order 4 McChickens, for lunch. And I was trying to gain, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of lost sight of the things that I knew deep down that I needed to be doing. I needed to be tracking my calories. I needed to be diligent about my lifts and lifting more, etc. But I fell off a little bit. And then in about February is when I signed up for a powerlifting meet, where I thought, I really need to light a fire under my ass. And I thought the only way to do that was to sign up for some sort of competition. And I knew that I wasn't ready for a bodybuilding competition, which I might be in the future, but I knew that I could do decent in a powerlifting meet. And so I signed up for a local powerlifting meet. It was just, it was a local one, raw, natural, etc. So no sleeves, no suits, just a belt, a singlet, and the wrist wraps. And with that said, I began my powerlifting training. I really didn't know what I was doing with that either. If you can't see a common theme, I tend to just jump into things and just assume that I know everything about it, and which I guess really isn't that good. But I didn't hire a coach or anything. I kind of got some basic information. I kind of knew what I was kind of supposed to be doing with that. And I started training heavier for lower reps. And I also, at that point, I weighed 175 pounds. I was a little bit fluffy. I had a little bit extra fat on me. And I was 175, pushing 176, 177. And I started to train, but I signed up very stupidly. I didn't realize that it's not good to cut for a meet, in terms of your strength and whatnot. And or I thought that if I trained really hard that I could maintain all the strength that I would gain if I were to cut the last couple weeks. And it was just really not smart, but now I know for next time. And so I started at 175, but I signed up for the weight class that was 162 pounds. Excuse me, 165 pounds. So I needed to lose 10 pounds while training to get as strong as possible in 3 or 4 months. And you see how that's a conflict of interest, because I can't get as strong as possible while also losing 10 pounds. To get as strong as possible, you need to be eating. And I wasn't doing that. I was cutting. During the first part, I kind of tried to maintain it with the thoughts of losing that last 10 pounds in the last month, which I actually did successfully. And so I gained quite a bit of strength. My bench went up a little bit, although it really wasn't going that well because it was so hard to gain strength because I wasn't in a caloric surplus. And I knew that I needed to be in one, but I'd already signed up for the meet at the lighter weight, trying to change it. I just didn't. I thought, I'll just do it and see what happens. So then I bought all my gear. I bought a singlet. I already had a belt and wrist wraps and stuff from training, but I bought the singlet. I was training hard in the gym, and I changed my split up as well from a normal kind of bro, or not a bro split, from a normal push pull legs or chest and back kind of split to a split that focused on the compound lift. So I was doing squat, bench, and deadlift like 3 days a week for squat and bench, then 1 day a week for deadlift. So I was doing almost no accessory work, but I thought if I focus on the squat, bench, and deadlift as much as possible, I'm gonna get as good at those as possible. And I made a little bit of progress with them, but like I said, it was really hindered by the lack of calories. And then about a month away from the meet, which the meet was June 11th, I started to cut. And so I was trying to maintain the little bit of strength that I'd gained while I was eating in a caloric maintenance while on a caloric deficit. And so that was really rough, but I lost the 12 pounds. I lost 12 pounds. I was 162 point something. I was supposed to be under 165. I was 162, so I made weight. And I actually did fairly good in the meet, all things considered. I actually got a state record in deadlift, which actually wasn't observed for some reason. Like, I swear that I got the weight. I checked the record. I beat it. I told them that I beat it. I filled out a form, but it's not on the website. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I got a state record in deadlift for my weight class and weight division and everything. And then I did okay in bench and I did okay in squat. But it wasn't what I was hoping for, but it was just the lack of calories. I needed to be eating and I needed to be training harder, which I couldn't train that hard when I didn't have enough calories, or I could try to, but I would just not make any progress because I wasn't giving my body the fuel. And then after that, after the powerlifting meet, it brought me into the current phase that I'm still in, where I'm trying to bulk, I'm trying to gain as much muscle mass as possible. I'm considering doing another powerlifting meet in the future, but I'm convinced that powerlifting just isn't for me. I do enjoy it quite a bit, but even more so, I enjoy just building a killer body and just having good lifts and being able to lift a lot and look great. And so that's more so what I'm going for right now, is just lifting as much as possible, training hard, training heavy, but also training with volume. So I'm just doing a lot, but I'm also bulking. I'm in quite a heavy surplus. And so I should be putting on some serious mass in these next couple months. I'm hoping to get up to a fairly lean, all things considered. I'm trying to bulk. I'm trying to really put as much of those calories into my muscle as possible. I'm trying to gain as much muscle as possible. I know I'm still going to gain some fat, but I want to get up to a solid 180 freaking beefcake. And then at that point, I'm going to consider if I should do a bodybuilding competition or if I should sign up for my second ever powerlifting meet. I hope you guys found that story entertaining and or gained a little bit of knowledge from it, but just know that I've been through all the ups and downs. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to building muscle, because I've built quite a bit these last few years. I've gained 40 pounds in the last 3 years. And with that said, that brings us to the hidden gem that I said was at the end of this video. So for those of you that stuck around, I'm currently hosting a free video training where I'm showing you how to gain an insane amount of muscle and confidence in just 12 weeks using everything that I've learned in my entire journey. Everything that I've learned, I've put into this to where I'm showing you the exact copy-paste system to gain an insane amount of muscle and confidence in just 12 weeks, without all the BS and misinformation and fluff that floats around the fitness industry that leaves you with zero results. This is what is actually going to get you real life results, because it's coming from someone who's actually done it the hard way with no help. I'm giving you the help that I wish that I had. So don't miss out on this opportunity. Go down below and click that first link to watch that video training. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Always remember to get her done.